So Shantae 1 came and went, and sadly, it was a game that just didn't sell well, and Capcom didn't help Wayforward making a sequel. Wayforward on their own started to make a GBA sequel titled Risky Revolution, but no publisher picked it up, and eventually the game would be scrapped. However, the company would take a lot of the ideas that they had planned for it, and when the time and money was right, they published onto the DSi shop Shantae Risky's Revenge in October of 2010. When it came out, it gained a lot of praise and was claimed to be the best game for the DSi. It was also notorious for being the most expensive game for the DSi at $12. I know that doesn't sound like much nowadays, but for the DSi, that was a little bit more than usual. And you can still find that version on the 3DS eShop. However, there's another version of the game you'll be better off with, and that's the Director's Cut on iOS, PC, PS4, and now Wii U. Not only does it make the game look overall sharper, but it also makes some adjustments to the gameplay as well, including a brand new gameplay mode that I'll talk about later. So this version gets you more bang for your buck, and it's even cheaper being at $10. But is it worth getting in the first place? Now, I'll be playing the PS4 version, but don't worry, every single version, besides the DSi version, is the exact same game, it's just a different controller, so don't worry too much. So, is this a sequel that really does take advantage of being a sequel? Only one way to find out, so let's get started. So Risky's Revenge doesn't really connect much in terms of plot to the original game, and I have a feeling that was done on purpose because, let's be real, not a lot of people played Shantae 1. All you really need to know is that you stopped Risky and you saved the day, that's about it. Uncle Mimic is having an expo showing off a magic lamp that Risky comes in and steals for herself. Shantae tries to stop her, but she gets hit by a cannonball that she had more than enough time to dodge, I'm just saying. And for failing to dodge a simple shot, she gets fired from being the guardian of Scuttletown. I thought it was like a community service kind of deal, but I guess you can get fired from that too, okay. Even with no job, Shantae plans to find the 3 magic seals that Risky needs to unleash the lamp's power, and put an end to her plan. So pretty much just as basic as the game before it. And just like that title, it works for what it is, though I couldn't help but notice one thing. Remember how I questioned why Risky even needed the Steam engine? There's kind of a similar situation in this game, but with Shantae. See, Risky needs to get all 3 of the seals in order to unleash the power of the lamp. Shantae is convinced that she needs to get all 3. Shantae, why don't you just get 1 or 2 of them and call it a day? If she doesn't have all of them, nothing happens, I'm just saying. But I probably shouldn't look too hard into this, so let's get a move on. The hardware power between the Game Boy Color to the DSi is a pretty massive jump, and as such the graphics are a definite upgrade from the Game Boy Color. The sprites have way more detail and the backgrounds are much more alive, with a bit of an angle that makes them feel like they have a lot more depth. Everything pops out in this world and there's no confusion between what's in the background and what's in the foreground. Probably the coolest effect is in Scuttletown and Tangled Forest, where you can jump in between different planes. It's pretty cool looking, and you can even see the upcoming areas in the background when you play these parts. It's a nice touch. And the instruments for the music have also been upgraded as well. Though admittingly, I can't help but find some of the music to be a little forgettable, but there are some good tracks here and there. Like Scuttletown and the first song of the game titled, She's Got Moves. Just telling you now, the songs in this series get weirder and weirder names as we go along, trust me. And while the game looks better, I think the characters are lacking in really interesting animations like the first game. In that game, the animations were used to convey different emotions. Here it's portraits with the characters just repeating the same standing animation. And the portraits are admittingly kind of awkward. They don't really change much, and some of the neutral ones can just look odd. Especially Shantae, who I swear is just saying every time it comes up. I don't know, it just makes some scenes feel kind of bland. But there are some good jokes in the script. The 2 characters that really stick out to me are the Squid Baron in Dungeon 1, who scams Shantae out of a tasty meal, and Barracuda Joe in the Battle Tower, and his deadpan style of humor. Personally, I think the first game has a sharper script, but this one still works. But that's about it presentation-wise for Risky's Revenge. Kind of short, I know, but there's a lot more change in the gameplay, so let's take a look at that. Risky's Revenge is like the first game. It's structured like a Metroidvania, where you need to explore the area, find the dungeon, get the seal, and move on. Though there are some changes from the original that I want to talk about right away. The first being that Scuttletown is the only town of the game, unlike Shantae 1 where every area had its own town. So the minigames are also kind of gone with that too, but don't worry. Enemies drop a lot more cash and you can also find it in dungeons a lot easier too. So it makes up for the lack of the minigames easily. The day and night system was also removed, as it stays day the entire time. It didn't add much last time, and especially without the towns, I don't think there would be a need for it, so yeah. There's also no longer a life system, and falling into a pit or stuff like that will just take a little health away from you instead. And save points are plentiful this time. Thank you. But now on to the new stuff. First off, the item system has been completely reworked. See that bar? That's your magic meter. Items with the exceptions of potions and hair upgrades now have all unlimited uses after you buy them. How long you can use the item is dictated by the amount of magic you have left. To upgrade items, you will need to buy them in the shop with the correct amount of magic gems. Usually 1 for the first upgrade to an item and more for the higher upgrade is how it tends to go. And to upgrade your health, you need to simply find heart holders like last time. As for the areas you'll explore, it's primarily 3, as the world is overall much smaller than it was in Shantae 1. You'll travel through a forest, desert, and ocean coast to go to the different dungeons. To be honest, there's really only 2 dungeons, being the first and third ones. 2 is more like a battle gauntlet of sorts, and to unlock these dungeons, you're gonna need to do some fetch quests by bringing an item to a certain character that needs it. If you ever need to backtrack, try looking for these warp squid statues that you can use to warp across the map. Just talk to one and then that place becomes a warp point that you can use by using another statue, with no baby squids required this time. As for your transformations, you have 3 this time around, with the returning elephant and monkey, that Shantae forgot how to perform and you need to relearn them. How do you forget something like that? Granted, it's been 8 years since your last game, but still, I think I'm starting to see the reason why you were fired. And the newcomer being the mermaid that's able to shoot bubble bullets and explore underwater. So yeah, no harpy or spider this time around. Aww. And lastly, let's talk about the 2 big changes that Director's Cut adds. For one, you can use any warp squid to go to another one, and they aren't paired like the DSi version, which is a lifesaver. And when you beat the game once, you'll unlock Magic Mode, where Shantae gets a new outfit, less health, but double the magic power to use. So basically it's a challenge run of sorts. And to be honest, that's about it when it comes to the gameplay additions for Risky's Revenge. So what did the game do right? So being a sequel years after the original game was released, you expect some changes and additions to be made to the game to make it overall a better experience. And Risky's Revenge thankfully does a lot of that. The biggest change you can see right away is the screen size. It's nowhere near as close to Shantae as it was in the Game Boy Color game. And because of that, along with the game being designed around Shantae running at all times with no actual run button, you're almost never gonna blindly run into enemies this time around. Not only that, but there are no longer any real leaps of faith in the game, because the screen will almost always show the floor, and if the pit is bottomless, they'll put skulls over it to clue you in. And like I said before, even falling into a pit or spikes only takes a small bit of health away. The actual screens are also nowhere near as big as they were last time, so if you fall into a pit, you only have a small bit of ground to make up. And there's also a lot more save points than the original game, as they're everywhere now and also appear in dungeons. You also get a lot more money by defeating enemies this time, so they're actually worth fighting, which means you can actually use the money to buy things this time instead of grinding forever just to get creams for survival. Or, you know, you can always just whip the dog for 100 gems. Sorry, not sorry. Hey, it's an achievement in the Steam version and Pirate's Curse makes it canon, alright? Leave me alone! And the overworld is no longer as big of a problem as the enemies are nowhere near as vicious as they were in the first game, and you're never unfairly ganged up on. Not to mention that you're given an actual map that clearly labels key landmarks, so with all these changes, it's safe to say that this game is nowhere near as punishing as the original game. and it's pretty comfortable difficulty-wise. I only died once near the beginning of the game, but that was it honestly. They also improved the transformation process. Instead of pressing select and then pushing the button pattern to get the dance, now all you need to do is hold down the button until the dance goes to the right one you want. It's still a little awkward, but it's overall faster. And the rest of the world pauses when you do it so you won't get unfairly cheap shotted like last time. I also love the new item system as well. In the first game, the items were okay, besides the creams, which were easily the best. But having unlimited uses thanks to the magic mirror makes them overall a lot more useful and fun to me. Even though pike balls are clearly the best ones, I'm just saying. And in magic mode, you can really get a lot of use out of them and breeze through the game no problem. Not to mention, Shantae can actually upgrade her hair this time, making it faster to attack with, which is easily the best item in the shop, and get it right away when you can. With all these improvements, it really feels like this game fixes all the problems from last time. Trust me, it may seem like that, but it doesn't. Risky's Revenge, despite fixing a lot of problems from Shantae 1, has a fair share of things that hold it back. While the actual world is nowhere near as dangerous as it was last time, the areas themselves remain just as bland with nothing really interesting in them. The world itself is also much smaller than Shantae 1, about half the size I want to say. And if you think that would help with the navigation, unfortunately it doesn't, because you need to backtrack to separate ends of the map over and over to progress. And a small world with that mentality means you're going to be seeing the same areas over and over and over in a very short amount of time. Not to mention the game is heavy on the fetch quests that will take you from one end of the map all the way to the other. So you're going to feel the dread of backtracking big time in this adventure. Not helping the backtracking is the map. It doesn't give you any details about the area you're in. So it won't mark any hidden areas or items that you still need to explore that you don't have the right upgrade for. Not to mention, it can be hard to exactly tell how it works in some areas. Like the desert, which is easily the worst part of the overworld because of the cave system. That's hard to figure out, and if you pass the area you were supposed to go out of, you basically need to do a full lap making this area drag out. Since I brought it up, the items that you're most likely looking for in the overworld are easily the magic jams. As stated before, they're used to upgrade your stuff in the shop, and honestly, to me it feels like an unnecessary roadblock. You have to get all the money to buy the item in addition to having the right amount of magic jams, when in the first game all you needed was some money for it. This just feels like another step to force you to explore more rather than something you want to explore for. I'd rather just have the option to buy everything in cash. I guess it's to make the game more balanced, but I'm not sure because the game is pretty easy. Honestly, the beginning is the hardest part, but after the first dungeon, the game's a breeze. Not in the fun way, but more in the dull, repetitive, no real challenge kind of way. Now as for the dungeons, I only really like the first one. The second one, the battle tower, I'm not sure I can really call it a dungeon. It's just a mindless enemy gauntlet that's very heavy in the copy and paste department. Like seriously, look at this footage, it's the same rooms over and over. And the third dungeon, as if getting to this point with the trading sequence and forcing you to get the thundercloud wasn't annoying enough. This is easily the most confusing part of the game with the eye puzzles that, trust me, you're going to get very, very lost on your first playthrough. And even on repeats, the dungeon itself is just not fun. Not to mention the boss fight here is pathetically easy. The transformations also feel kind of weak. The only one that I think is used well is the monkey, but the other two, okay, here's what the elephant can do. And that's the extent of the elephant in Risky's Revenge. Seriously, you break a rock and then you transform right back away. It's pointless. You do get a stomp later on, but that's even more situational, and I keep forgetting that the elephant can even do that. And the mermaid feels very last minute. You use it for a fetch quest, and then this only once, nothing else like the rest of the game, shooter segment that lasts way too long, and that's it. And it's so late into the game, it kind of makes me wonder why they even have this, kind of like the harpy from last time. Speaking of which, as I played through the game, I kind of wondered why they scrapped the harpy. Like I said last time, despite being a really cool transformation, I don't think it was used enough in that game being so close to the end. Why not bring it back here and flesh it out more, especially with the backtracking? It could have helped minimize that. The Scratch GBA game even had plans for the heartbeat to come back, so why get rid of it? Well, there is a potential answer that leads into the game's biggest problem for me. Risky's Revenge was planned to be an episodic game, but they scrapped that idea and made episode 1 into the full game, and as such it really feels incomplete. The game takes about 3 hours to get through, only 2 real dungeons, a smaller world. It doesn't feel like a full sequel, but rather half of the content of the previous game. That's not even mentioning the abrupt gameplay mechanics like the shooting segment from earlier, or the plane switching in Scuttletown or Tangled Forest. They just kind of show up and don't really build up gameplay wise to anything. And the ending of the game is completely unfulfilling. It just kind of ends with no real sense of accomplishment. And is it me, or did this game feel a lot more bland than the original? Like it's nowhere near as frustrating. But I think the first game overall had a lot more memorable moments in both gameplay and the dialogue to still keep it in my mind. Here, everything just feels like it's there with no real excitement behind it, and the dialogue, despite a few moments here and there, is really dull as well. And to be honest, that's how I'd say most of the game is. Dull. I never felt this big sense of progression in the game, and nothing really stuck out, making it just feel kind of there for me. Like it's supposed to be building up to something bigger that just doesn't exist. And just when you feel like the game is starting to ramp up, it just kind of ends. So there's very little replay value for the main game, and besides Magic Mode, which only changes things up slightly, that's about it. And for a 3-hour game, it doesn't make an impact to where I want to really go out of my way to replay it again. Man, Risky's Revenge leaves me in such a weird state of mind. Now, here's the thing, I love video game sequels. I think you're really able to take advantage of what you had last time and build upon it. I mean, games like Ratchet 2 and Sly 2 are great examples of games that took their series to new heights. But Risky's Revenge just kinda leaves it at the same level, which was, overall for me, meh. Risky's Revenge has this feeling throughout the entire game that it's trying to be bigger than it actually is. It improves on a lot of things like the saving, the screen layout, and the exploration, but it does have its own problems like the planned dungeons, the backtracking aplenty, and the weak transformations, and not helping that is the feeling that there's supposed to be something more here, but there isn't. And as a result, I think the game suffers. And I won't lie, I think I actually put this at the same level as Shantae 1. While there are some things in that game I just can't stand, it kept me interested throughout the entire journey. It had more standout moments and felt complete. I can't say the same for Risky's Revenge. While the second game is better gameplay wise, I think the original has a lot more going for it as a standalone title. Basically, if Risky's Revenge was the only Shantae game, I doubt it'd stand out from the crowd. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not calling the game bad, it's just okay. And that's really about it. If you're gonna play it, play the director's cut version, but even then, wait for it to go on sale for like $5 or less. Because while it's alright, I don't think it's something you should go out of your way for. So we're halfway through this marathon and we haven't been doing too well. That's not a good sign for things to come. But maybe the next game, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, will be able to be the one that can break the mold. Or, you know, maybe it'll just be the same song and dance, but only one way to find out. So I'll see you later, me hearties. There's gonna be a lot of pirate puns, just so you know.